Hello, my friends. Welcome to Marvel Mayhem, the series where I watch everything that Marvel has produced in the world of television and for the big screen. And I ask the simple question, is it worth watching? And today we're going to review 1985's Red Sonja, or is it 1985's Red Sonja. The fearless warrior, Red Sonja, seeks out to avenge her family's murder and rid her kingdom from the tyrannical rule of evil Queen Gedrin. Arnold Schwarzenegger stars as Lord Calidor, and Bridget Nelson stars as Red Sonja. So, the only kind of interesting, I'll tell you what I think about the movie in a bit, but sometimes I like to give you trivia or interesting facts about the movie before I get into it. So, the only interesting bit of trivia is that the character of Calidor is supposed to be Conan the Barbarian. Like they're the same, but they didn't have the rights to Conan. So, because Red Sonja exists in the Conan universe. So they didn't have the rights to Conan, so they renamed him Calidor, and they wanted to take the character of Valeria, who is a thief in the Conan movies and Conan's big love interest, and they wanted to take her and put her in this movie as Red Sonja, and they wanted to have the same actress play her, and her name was or is Sandal Bergman, and she turned it down. They said, "Do you want to be Red Sonja?" And she was like, "No," which is surprising. But then she accepted the role of the main villainess of this movie, Queen Gedrin. So, if you were watching these movies in the early 80s, I think you'd be quite confused because first you'd see Arnold Schwarzenegger looking a lot like Conan, acting a lot like Conan, but with a different name, and then you'd see his love interest be the 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 evil queen. Like I think that it would have been very confusing for a lot of people. All right, let's get into the movie. So the character does appear in Marvel Comics, but it's not a Marvel creation. So having this as a Marvel movie is kind of like saying that Sherlock Holmes movies are Marvel movies because Sherlock Holmes appeared in Marvel Comics. But anyway, I'm going to consider it to be a Marvel movie. It begins with a flashback of a goddess talking to Red Sonja, and it explains how Red Sonja's family was murdered because the evil queen wanted to get with Sonja. Sonja was like, "No, thank you. Not doing that." And the queen got angry, murdered her family, and had her men violate Sonja. So, in often people don't like when movies start with flashbacks, but this one makes a lot of sense because it gives you a reason why Sonja is on this quest for vengeance. Um, so the goddess in this movie, in this flashback, says some. I guess it's not a flashback; it's more like a vision. Says your sword arm will need to be strong for this vengeance, and I will give you strength. And then there's like a magic scene where her sword arm is strengthened by this goddess. And that got me thinking about something that I find really annoying in modern movies. And I don't want to sound like one of those anti feminist film bros who criticize any woman character beating up any man. But I think you have to give a reason for the characters to be so strong. Like with Black Widows, for example. I don't know. You probably know who the Black Widows are if you're watching this. But if you don't know, the Black Widows are like assassins in the Marvel universe, and they were trained in Russia, I think, as part of some Soviet program. And anyway, they're trained to kill people all of their lives in a very brutal training, the Red Room and all of that. So it makes sense that they can fight and hold their own against guys because they've been training their entire lives to do so. But what I find really irritating is when they have female characters who clearly don't have any training with any martial art, kind of like holding their own against like bad guys just because that's what the plot demands, and you haven't done any work to make that character believable as somebody who knows all of those things. But like it's also a trope for men too who shouldn't have any experience with martial arts, knowing martial arts. Like, think about 80s detective movies where they just suddenly start to do kung fu or something. So I'm kind of annoyed by that trope at this point, and I'm glad that this movie actually puts work into explaining why its character is so strong at this thing that she's going to do. She's going to spend most of the movie doing. I mentioned, and I don't know if you noticed this, but I mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger's name before Bridget Nelson's name. And Bridget Nelson is like 100% the star of the movie. And Arnold Schwarzenegger is a co-star. Arnold Schwarzenegger is in maybe about like 35% of the movie, and Bridget Nelson is in 45% of the movie. So his name comes first in the credits, and I'm sure he really fought for that to happen, so he can be like a bigger star. But I imagine Bridget Nelson was really disappointed when she saw that, because basically she was just living her best life as a hot Swedish model, and they came to her and they said, "You'd be perfect for this role." She's like, "Oh, I didn't think about acting, but sure, I'll do that." And she's like, "Oh, my name is going to be on the lights, up in the lights, on the marquee." And then, oh, Schwarzenegger, that doesn't make any sense. It's not even alphabetical. A, I guess, is before B, but it doesn't really seem fair. So the pacing in this part of the movie is really excellent, although I think it does drag a little towards the end. So Arnold is riding during the credit scene. He's just riding around, and there's instrumental music, which is monumental and great. So there's these priestesses, and they're doing this ritual to destroy this magic stone because it's too powerful, but this magic stone was used to create the world. Then there's a battle because these soldiers come, sent by Queen Gedrin to kidnap the stone. And in the battle, I think they're all these priestesses are wearing like these skimpy clothes, but they have swords. And I think the soldiers weren't really expecting to barge into a room full of people with swords. So they have like a battle, and the priestesses also kind of seem to have been trained to this, but so I don't have any problems with them being good at swordplay, but they kind of push the soldiers out, and then soldiers come through the roof through this like chimney thing, and then the attack starts again, and the priestesses lose. And what I like about this part is that it seems like the violence has consequences. Like, people are stabbed and there's blood. But there's not like as much blood as there would be in this situation in real life, and there's not as much gore as there would be in real life. But there's a lot more than there is in a lot of these movies, right? So it's kind of like a small little thing saying, like, this is a violent world, this is a brutal world that these characters are living in, and I liked that aspect of it. Another thing that I mentioned, the skimpy outfits. The other thing is that the costume design in this movie is wonderful. It's so over the top. So the soldiers that I mentioned, they have these helmets, and on the helmets there are like these deer antlers, really crazy look. And on their helmets, the helmets literally have teeth to make them look more intimidating. And I think that this is legitimately a good movie. I know people kind of, I don't know, I think it's got like a 5 out of 10 on IMDb, but I think it's a really good movie. I really enjoyed it. The music is monumental, and Arnold doesn't seem to be a very good swordsman, but he chops off a guy's head, which I think is effective. And I think the, thinking about it, considering it, the reason I like this movie so much is probably because this is going to make me sound very, very old, and I'm nearly 50, so bear with me, but Conan movies were the fantasy movies of my youth. The Lord of the Rings came later when I was in universities, but Conan movies were my imagination of what fantasy should be. Like barbaric, and the characters live in a world where they believe that magic is real. It does apparently appear to be real in this movie, but the characters believe in it, and it's this kind of brutal world, right? Um, yeah, all right. I like also how everybody calls her Red Sonja, but it's kind of weird. Like, I don't think that there are a bunch of other Sonias running around that you need to distinguish that she is Red Sonja, but that's what they say. And there's another good scene where Sonja has been training as a swordswoman because she wants to take vengeance upon her enemies. And she's training with this master. And the master says one of those like pseudo wise things like, Sonja, your hatred of mankind will be doing your hatred of men will be your undoing. And she says, "Oh, I don't hate all men." And she's kind of flirting with him, but he is like a really old man. And he says something like, "Oh, Sonja, if you had said that 40 years ago, I would have been very happy." And I like how in this movie, this kind of creepiness is addressed, because she looks up to him and he could use that to his advantage, but he doesn't, which is uh, which is good. And Calidor, aka Conan, has some great line reads and great lines in this movie, like, "I'm looking for Red Sonja. Your sister is dying. I will take you to her." And partly that's because of Calidor's and Conan's character. He's not a guy who's very verbose. But it's also because of Arnold Schwarzenegger's limitations as an actor at that time, because he didn't know English very well, so they're not going to give him long paragraphs to memorize. But I think it works really well because he can't be a like, you can't use the character for exposition dumps. And because you can't use Conan's character for exposition dumps, you can't really use the other ones for that purpose also. So it forces the movie to be more creative in terms of storytelling than a lot of modern movies would be, and it's good. I like it. Yeah, I'd say it's like an A plus movie. The writing is great. So I'm not going to explain the whole plot, but basically, on the attack, when the soldiers attacked the temple, where the priestesses were trying to destroy this stone, they steal the stone, and that leads to the rest of the events of the movie. But in the battle, they've actually stabbed Red Sonja's sister, which is why Calidor goes to look for her. And so the sister eventually dies, and Calidor says, so there's a scene, so the writing is great because of moments like this. So there's a scene where her sister dies, and you think that Calidor is going over to her to be like a supportive guy. And he puts his arm on her shoulder, not to comfort her, but just to say this line: the dead are gone and the living have work to do. Like, basically, like, you pick up your stuff now. Let's get going. We got work to do. And Sonja says, her work and my work are no concern of yours. And I'm going to make another little rant here because I think that this is important for filmmakers out there, or maybe casting directors more than filmmakers. So, Arnold has an Austrian accent, very clearly. It works well with the character of Conan because he's supposed to be this foreign barbarian kind of guy. Sonja, because Brigitte Nelson is Swedish, has a Swedish accent, kind of works well for her character as well. Her sister, though, who grew up probably in the same family, in the same town, has a British accent. You can't have two sisters who grew up together have different accents because that doesn't make any sense. You know, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, so it's not just a problem with this movie. I've seen it in, I won't say many movies, but I've seen it in enough where I'm like, oh my god, that annoys me. So don't do that. So Calidor is full of great lines in this movie. So the sister dies, and Sonja says, Calidor, what do I owe you for bringing back my sister to me? And he says, I'm not a mercenary. You don't owe me anything. No one owes me anything. And if I feel like someone owes me something, I will take it. Which is like, Calidor does not believe in your money. Okay, but more seriously, there's a part that illustrates kind of the theme of this movie. So the theme is all about Sonja's quest for vengeance. And so she's traveling by herself and she needs to go through this toll road. And there's a character named Freitag. And Freitag says she won't be able to use the toll road unless she pays. And she's like, okay, how much do you want? And he's like, no, that's not what I mean. And she's like, oh, okay, no. And so she's like, no, I'm going to go and you're not going to get what you want. And then they have this battle, and I'll tell you more about the battle in a moment. But what I wanted to mention is that the theme of the movie is basically like Sonja's attempt to kind of navigate this world where the threats to her life and her person are a lot different than they are to a man, right? So men can be humbled, they can be beaten up, but they're never going to be subjected to this kind of sexual violence that happened to her at the beginning of the movie and is constantly being threatened to her again and again. So, back to this actual battle. So, Freitag, the actor, very charismatic, very over-the-top kind of villain. And he says, I will read your future in your entrails, little red one. And so many great lines. But unfortunately, Sonja doesn't get very many great lines in this movie. And I think Nielsen does a great job as Sonja. She's also supposed to be this stoic, monosyllabic person, and she is that. But yeah, they could have put a little bit more, given her more interesting lines. There's another subplot that I didn't really talk about where it's an attempt to make Sonja seem more human. There's this prince who's like 8 or 9 and he's really full of himself because he's a prince. So she rescues him from this disaster and then she goes on her way, and then she finds that he is literally being quartered, like, you know, when one limb of yours to one horse and then another limb to another horse. And so she rescues him again, and then you can see how, I don't want to say motherly, because it's not really motherly, it's more like big sister vibe that she has with this boy. Like, look, you are, like, you need to start thinking in the right way to be a king. So she's a real good mentor figure. And actually, now that I think about it, like, that part of the movie is kind of played for comedy, but I think it's kind of the heart of the movie. Like, learning how to be a better person in this brutal world is like so important. And there's a scene where the prince, the prince kind of has a thing for her because she's attractive and he's a boy, and he says that she'll marry him someday. And I think the last line, he says something like, which shows that she has helped him mature. He says something like, I will marry you someday. And then there's a little back and forth. And then he says, oh, but probably there will be other women in my life. And I don't think, like, the way I'm saying it sounds like it's like a flippant remark from him, but actually it's a kind of a mature thing. There'll be other women, maybe better women for me in my life than you. And like, thank you is the subtext that's not being said there. So I think that's really, really good. There's all of these like fun little moments in this movie. So Queen Gedrin has this magician, and this magician can use magic to kind of see far away in this cauldron, like in, I guess, Snow White. But he uses magic, and then there's like this dancing girl, and Gedrin's like, what is that? And he's like, oh, wrong channel. I mean, he doesn't say wrong channel, but it's clearly like the wrong channel, so it's great. Yeah, and then there's the romance between Sonja and Galador is a bit ridiculous because I don't think that they have very much chemistry. I don't think that Nelson and Schwarzenegger really liked each other on this film, and you can kind of tell. So it doesn't really work. But one good scene that they have, it's not really a scene because you don't really see the whole thing, but so basically Sonja says to Galador that she's made a vow that the only person who can win her heart is somebody who defeats her and kills her. And Galador is like, well, that's ridiculous. You can only have happiness if you die, which is a great point, Galador. But anyway, so they're fighting, like, they're not trying to kill each other, but they're fighting, they're trying to win this sword battle. Like, he's trying to win the sword battle because he wants to get with her. And the battle, the way they show the fact that they're both great swords people is that they've been fighting all night. They start, like, around supper time, and dawn rises, and they're still fighting this sword battle. So that's good. I would say the film drags a little bit towards the end, but it's still quite an enjoyable film. And I would say, since I started Marvel Mayhem, this is probably the best movie I've seen. And I know technically not Marvel film, but yeah, if you can go find Red Sonja from 1985, do so, especially if you like fantasy. It's got great moments. It's really good, I would say. So that's what I think about Red Sonja. What do you think about Red Sonja? Put your thoughts in the comment section. Like and subscribe if you like what I do. I'm trying to get to 900 subscribers by the end of April. So yeah, if you like what I do, please like and subscribe and stick around for the next video on the channel, which will be The Incredible Hulk Returns. So if you're interested in the Incredible Hulk series starring David Bixby, about David Banner, not Bruce Banner, about David Banner, check that one out. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.